Hi, I'm Nate Flax.
I'm Noah Longworth McGuire.
And this is Talking Lion.
Talking Lion is a podcast focused on artist-to-artist conversations.
We're primarily artists, a duo called Sleeping Lion. And throughout our career as songwriters and producers, we've had the opportunity to work with so many incredible rising artists.
Talking Lion is about hitting record on the conversations we've had with our musical friends and collaborators to get a glimpse into what their life's been like and where it's going.
A few reminders before we start.
Firstly, we now have a Patreon for fans of the show to show their support and help keep the show going.
As a Patreon subscriber, not only will you earn rewards, but you'll also gain exclusive access to a chat room in our Discord server.
Here you can talk with us and even suggest questions for our guests.
Go to patreon.com/talkinglion to subscribe.
We appreciate your support.
As we mentioned, we also have a Discord server that's become a sort of community hub for Sleeping Lion and Talking Lion. We're very active on there and very eager to talk to you about who you are on the show and how you feel about the new episodes, as well as just talking about life.
So yeah, come through and you can talk with us. You can make some new friends, share your art, and share your memes.
Go to sleepinglionmusic.com/discord to join our server.
We hope to see you there.
Quick announcement. You can now vote for Talking Lion for the 16th Annual People's Choice Podcast Awards.
Your vote could get us nominated, and we can even win an award for this show.
Your support and that recognition would mean the world to us. So please go to podcastawards.com to vote for Talking Lion in the music category. Lastly, our face is on a shirt. We have shirts now for Talking Lion with our faces on them. If you want to wear us on your shirt, buy a shirt. It helps support the show, and it shows your friends that you like Sleeping Lion and Talking Lion.
You can find these shirts on our website, sleepinglionmusic.com/store. Pro tip: Patreon supporters of the honorary Lion tier or higher will get a free shirt.
Now back to the show.
We recorded this episode with our friend David Schuler from the Bad Dreamers.
We first met David in early 2019. We were both opening for Transviolet at the Echo. We discovered we had many mutual friends and quickly hit it off.
We recorded this episode following the release of his record Space and Time. He also recently co-wrote all the music for an upcoming animated show called Do, Re, and Me, featuring Kristen Bell and Fred Armisen. A content warning for this episode: we talk about alcoholism and abuse, so if you or anyone listening is triggered by this, you might want to skip this episode and listen to another one.
A two-time Grammy-nominated multi-platinum producer, songwriter, and filmmaker, David has worked with such legendary artists as John Legend, Daughtry, the Backstreet Boys, Scott Stapp, and Pink. He's a legend in his own right, and we had a great time talking to him. So,
without further ado,
I'm David from the Bad Dreamers, and this is Talking Lion.
well, hey.
hello.
What's up, fellas? How we doing?
Good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I don't think I've seen you guys since the show we had at the Echo.
Yeah, and that was probably that was January 2019. So it's been, or February 2019. So it's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
That was, I think, one of my favorite shows. My friends from New York had visited, and my aunt had visited. So it was just like a big, and then everybody was just singing and hanging out, and
it was a great crowd. It was a Transviolet show, right?
It was a Transviolet show.
Transviolet's obviously amazing.
You guys were amazing. It was awesome.
Yeah,
it was really good energy that day.
I feel like Transviolet just brings in such a awesome energy, just in terms of their fans and their draw. At least here in LA, I've only seen them here, but it's always a good time when they throw a show. So
they're just incredibly kind, and I honestly, the first word that comes into my head is generous. They're just very generous people, because they are always willing to help, willing to support. And in a lot of ways, they were the first LA band that took us seriously as songwriters and as human beings, and they're just, as friends, really generous with their with their time as well,
Yeah. Yep.
How did you know Transviolet? Because I think that's the thread to how we all met, because we both opened for them.
Yeah, I think they're all from Rochester with the exception of Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm from Rochester. The first time I met them, they were at a party in Glendale with a bunch of other Rochester people that I'm tight with. And I think just the sort of their circle of people and some of the people that I was hanging out with just sort of knew each other. So they came to the house in the very early days. This was like 2013, maybe 2014.
Wow.
So it was a minute ago.
So that was because we actually listened to them back in college, because we had I think it was the first Discover Weekly ever had their songs. That was kind of how that all. We had heard about you when we came out here, like just from the grapevine. Like, you know, you're a great writer and you've got, you know, good communities around you. So it was cool to like meet you in person at the show, you know?
Yeah, totally. No, that was a really fun night.
Going back a little bit, where are you from originally?
Yeah, so I am from Rochester.
Right.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah, I grew up there. I've been in LA now for almost 8 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
I go back. Well, I would typically go back for the holidays to see family and whatnot. But yeah, I've been here since September 13, so like 7.5 years.
Oh wow, we got here September 17.
Yeah.
So we're just starting to approach the experienced LA residents.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The first sort of tier of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it takes a minute to acclimate.
How long do you have to live here before you're in Angelino? There's this joke that like you're not a Roman unless you've lived there for 7 generations. Like how does that work? In how quick is LA as a culture to invite you into their squad?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like.
Do you consider yourself an Angelino,
or do you consider yourself a New Yorker?
I think both for sure. I mean, I think I'm here for good now. Like this is home, but. I don't know that I would have said that even at like the 2-year mark. I was still sort of on the fence because it does take a minute to acclimate and sort of find like, I don't know, your tribe, so to speak. And, you know, like the places that you love and the things that you want to do and everything. Like, you know, so I used to live in Port Chester. I was in Port Chester before I came here. And for those that don't know, Port Chester is like a 45-minute train ride into Manhattan. So I wasn't in the city. I was a bridge and tunnel crowd, but I was in Manhattan, you know, multiple days a week. And it's just a different world there. You know, like they built New York up and they built LA out, you know, so like everything is very spread out. Commitments are a little trickier here if you don't have a car or if, you know, like if there's traffic or whatever. So yeah, it takes a minute to adjust for sure, but I do love it. I mean, every city has its pitfalls, of course, but, yeah, I just think Los Angeles, for any creative-minded type, this is like the intersection of all that culture, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, without question. So did you start your music and songwriting journey in New York and in the city, or did that start mainly when you were in LA? Because like we started Sleeping Lion in Boston, but I didn't really even know songwriting was like a thing that somebody does until we like passed through Nashville on the way to LA. So
interesting. Yeah. I mean, like all throughout junior high and high school, I was playing in bands, always, you know, sort of just with friends and whatnot and gigging a lot. And then in my 20s, I joined a band called the Sunstreak, which was like, you know, a very much kind of like Warped Tour centric kind of pop punk sort of thing. Maybe not. Maybe
I was
not
in
so
that
much,
scene, so the name's like ringing a bell.
Yeah, it wasn't like so much on the emo side of it, but it was definitely like a more of a pop leaning sort of punk stuff. But yeah, so we we did Warped Tour in 2006. We were the Barbecue Band. Nice. And yeah, I don't know if you don't know what the Barbecue Band look it up. It's like boot camp for touring musicians.
Right.
But yeah, so we did the Barbecue Band thing on Warped Tour, and they had done 2 previous Warped Tours before I joined. And we toured really hard from 2006 to 2010. And we were independent until 2009, and then we signed a deal with EMI, and we put a record out that we'd made independently that got us the deal. So really, like I would say that things became quite serious for me when I joined that band. Maybe not so much as a songwriter, but just as, you know, a musician with any sort of real goal-minded kind of project that was coming to fruition, because it was the first time I was in a band that was drawing crowds and selling out venues and stuff like that. So that was the first sort of inclination that I felt like, you know, some degree of that life was real and that it was attainable. Because I mean, I'm sure you guys know, or any musician knows, when you first start playing gigs, you're playing to empty rooms, and it's really hard to, you know, it's hard to build anything from the ground up.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so when throughout the course of that time, our manager, who kind of became did become my mentor as a songwriter. His name's Billy Mann. He's an incredible writer, producer, has an incredible career going back to the 90s. He was managing the band. And although I was producing and mixing our albums and I had a heavy hand in the songwriting, when things started to sort of slow down with the Sunstreak, he and I had a conversation and he was like, well, we should see what that means for you as a writer and a producer, because if the band thing isn't going to, if the Sunstreak isn't going to be the thing, what does that mean for you looking ahead? What's that move? And so I came here in 2010 for the summer. And I thought I wanted to come here. And then that summer, he was on the board at EMI, and then he moved from EMI to BMG and became the president of North America.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, look, I'm going to start a small publishing company. We'll admin it through BMG. I was the first writer that he signed to this little publishing company at the time. And he was like, move to his place is in, it's like in Connecticut, sort of past Westchester. But he has a beautiful home studio. Yeah, he was like, move near me. Don't move into Manhattan, but move into an area that's like close to my studio at home, but also close to the city, so that you can kind of bounce back and forth between the two. And he was like, any writers or any artists that I have come through, I'll make sure you're in the room. And I thought I knew how to write songs until I started writing songs with Billy, because I didn't know how to write songs. I didn't know what the craft of songwriting was. I thought just writing your feelings down, making them rhyme, and putting them to a melody, I thought that was songwriting. And I suppose it is, but there are levels to it,
Well, and in the most supportive way, like I'll tell newer writers that like you're only touching the surface when you've passed your first 200 in a room or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like the actual ability to like sit with somebody and understand what your job in that room is.
Yeah.
Like the beginning of a session is figuring out what your role is.
Right.
To begin with, you know,
totally.
let alone practicing and learning how to do each of those roles or each combination of those roles well and in a meaningful kind of way.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and it changes with every session too. It's very much informed by the dynamic between you and that other writer, or you and that other artist, or numerous people in the room. But yeah, learning how to be sort of liquid in that environment, but efficient enough to walk out at the end of the day with a full song written that's part of the craft. It's part of that's more like the trade, let's say, and maybe not the craft of writing songs. But yeah, so when I started working with Billy closely, I got a really quick, hard lesson in how a great song could be written. And it was an incredible experience. And through that, I sort of co-written and co-produced a few songs on some amazing international artist records like Ricky Lee. I had my first #1 hit in Australia with her, artists like the Saturdays, and then that sort of rolled into like a song with John Legend that was on his album Love in the Future, and then some stuff with Pink, and then it kind of just started snowballing from there. And I didn't have any singles per se in North America, but it was just going through that grind with him, sort of holding my hand through that process and showing me how to produce and showing me how to write a compelling story lyrically, was very much what I would consider like my real introduction to songwriting and production. And then once we had some momentum, I came out to LA in 2013, and I've been here ever since.
LA is tough if like you come in and you are having to like build out that momentum, and that's a path, but always you'll feel the strain of just getting the first gears moving. But if you're moving with momentum, if you come out with momentum, people are typically like down for a chat or down, to sort of open. So, to anybody listening, if you are living in New York or whatever, everything you're doing will lead, it's not like you start on square one when you get to LA. Everybody, if anything, it gets multiplied coming out here because everybody just wants to talk to the hot new thing that's, that's out here. But I want to like circle back really quickly on,
sure.
Like, because I know you got nominated for a Grammy for the John Legend stuff and for the Pink stuff.
Yep.
What were those processes like? Were you in the room with them? Like, how did those records come to be, and what did you learn from them?
So I think the John Legend song happened first. He was coming up from New York to write with Billy for 2 days. So he came to Billy's place, and he and Billy were sort of in the room, sort of for the first day, just talking. And there was another artist that was there who's incredibly successful now. His name's Alex Iono. He has a huge following on social media. He was just in a movie called Finding Ohana. So Billy is still Alex's manager, and Billy and I were working with Alex. This is 2012. So he was much younger then. And so I was working with Alex that day, like at another part of the house, and Billy was writing with John Legend. So Billy and John wrapped the day and they wrote this song. And then at the end of the day, Billy came to me and he was like, so John's coming back tomorrow really early. I think you should forget about going to bed tonight and spend the entire night putting a track together so that when he comes back, he has something to hear based on what we just wrote, and he can get excited about it. We can cut a vocal and we can go from there. So that night I stayed up all night working on a track until 6 or 7. And he showed up at like 9. He loved it. And he sang the song the whole way through 3 times, and that was it. There was no punching, there was no dubbing. There's no backgrounds or anything like that on the song. But I was in the room when he did it, and I was just like, this is why he is who he is. It's incredible. So yeah, and then that song, it didn't come out on his album as a single, but I think it gained some traction when it was licensed, I think in like a Nivea commercial before the record was out. So yeah, and then when the album was nominated for a Grammy, I actually didn't even find out about it. I wasn't paying attention. I found out, I think, a year and a half after the fact.
Oh my God.
Because it was also that album came out like not long after I moved out here. So there was just I was very busy and there was a lot of to do. And I didn't really pay attention to the awards that year because there was so much happening. But so I kind of found out post awards season.
Post hoc.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's straight up goals.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah, I'm obsessed with that.
Is to be, so like in what you're up to not know, that this thing has happened.
Yeah.
I love that.
I suppose. I mean, I don't know, looking back, but then again, no, I shouldn't say. I was going to say like maybe I would have attended or something, but when the Pink song was nominated the year prior and I find out, I didn't go. Like, I just don't care. Like all the award thing and like the partying and all that stuff, it's like there's a degree of it that is valuable, to get into environments where you can connect with people. But I just find that to be such an unnatural way to build relationships. And the last thing that I would ever want to do is like throw a suit on to go celebrate something I did with a bunch of, it's just not it's not my speed. And like, I think it's, it's not like it was Pink's record that got nominated. And then by way of that nomination, the producers were also nominated. So it was cool to be in the company of guys like Max and obviously Billy and a handful of other really talented producers that I had felt like I had no business being on that short list with. But I suppose that's kind of how those stories start. But yeah, I was in Rochester that night. I watched the Grammys on TV, and I don't think she won, but it was still, it's really cool to be acknowledged for work. But I think I don't know, I enjoy cooking much more than I do eating the meal. Like, I think the process is so awesome when it comes to creating things. And when it's done, like I whenever I finish a project, I feel like a strange sense of grief because I enjoy the exploration and the sort of evolution of what something sort of begins as and how it grows into what it ultimately becomes.
I'm sort of two minds about it because, like, on the one hand, I got a little bit uncomfortable when people say nice things to me. Like, right. I'll take it every once in a while, but then that is, you're right. There is something that it does oftentimes feel very weird about having that kind of attention. Yeah. But on the other side, somebody says it's really, really important to celebrate the little victories.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the big victories or whatever, because so much of what we do, it isn't there. Like so much of what we do, there aren't those moments.
Yeah. There's no tangible. There's I feel like there's a lot of, it's very abstract working in music. Like even if you like have a song that does really well, oftentimes it's just numbers on a screen. And I feel like that's part of the appeal of the Grammy to me, is like it's solid. It's something
like he wants
solid.
To take a shot out of it.
I want to take a shot out of a Grammy. Yeah. Like just because it's like, that's
like Drake did.
Like that's a physical thing. And it's not so much about the accolade or like what it means for my career. It's more just about the physical world manifestation of the 10,000 hours and the grit and the hustle of, that I've thus put into my creative endeavors. But even that's a double-edged sword. But I think that's where the appeal for it comes from for me.
Yeah. It is like it's a representation of a period of your life where, you were dedicated to something and just trying to make something that you loved, hopefully that other people would then love, sort of by way of that process.
Well, and I think it lets you in a lot of ways, wake up the next day and be like, oh, cool, I'm still doing this. As they say in The Bachelor, for the right reasons.
Right.
Like I feel like I'm like 80% sure that I'm in music because I love music and collaboration and creation and all that stuff. But like, until maybe I get a little bit of that recognition or a little bit of that money situation. I mean, the money situation is nice, but like I feel like every time some of those boxes, some of the more superficial boxes are checked, the more I can confirm, oh, that's not why I was here. Or like, oh, that's not why, this is the case.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. And it's also like, I think we have a tendency just as humans to build a strange set of expectations when we fantasize over anything. And, the truth is that like when those things come to fruition, it's very, very rare that they manifest in the way that we imagine them or exactly as we imagine them. And I think, what also comes with that is an emotional response that is very likely not at all what we anticipated it to be. So yeah, it's good to have goals and it's good to have, because you need something. Like trying to build a career in the arts, it's a moving target and you have to have your eyes set on, you have to have your sight set on that target at all times. And it's constantly evolving and changing and it evolves. Success is relative to the individual defining it, right?
Well, and that's what's actually I'm really curious about you because, we have a lot of like new artists on the show and a lot of artists who have had decade-long careers and stuff. And, you tend to ask the new artists, what's your goalpost? Like, what do you want? And oftentimes they'll say, well, the platinum record or Grammy nomination and stuff like that. But when that has been achieved or when that is not, where your sort of spirit in this is aligned, I'm so curious what your goalpost is. Like, is it to build communities? Is it to open a cafe in the middle of the woods? Like what, what, because everybody needs, I think, the feeling of they have hit a certain mark. That's just how we're built. Humans are very goal oriented. I know you're very journey oriented too, but like, what is your goal right now? Like, where are you? Like, what could you hit now that would feel like you've hit the mark you're aiming for?
Yeah, it slightly digresses from the music, but I suppose it's not necessarily too far off topic. So I started making films when I started making music when I was 12. I'm so passionate about genre film and horror film. I've been making them my entire life. And a large motivator for coming to Los Angeles was to really start sort of bringing that possibility to life, to start making my own films. I look at guys like John Carpenter who write and direct and score their own films. And that's always been kind of the ultimate end goal for me, is to be writing and directing and scoring my films. So yeah, I've made, in the last 5 years, I started a production company with my ex, who I'm still best friends with. And we've produced a number of short films now. We're getting ready to make our first feature at the end of the year. So, I think it's a funny thing too, because a lot of times when the topic of, like, I suppose my work in film comes up with other fellow musicians that only know me to be a musician, it kind of creates this weird stink, because it's like, well, you're like a producer and a writer. And it's like, well, I've given just as much time to the craft of filmmaking as I have to music, but I've kind of compartmentalized those two worlds, because, I'm not walking around wearing a shirt that says I'm a filmmaker too. You know what I mean? I'm just doing the work to try and pursue that ultimate kind of, that ultimate goal of, being a sort of all-encompassing storyteller.
You're saying this. I love this, because you're saying this on our podcast. Like people have tried for a while to say, like, okay, we'll focus on this and focus on that. Like, aren't you guys artists? Well, yes, but we're also songwriters and producers. Yeah, right. And we're going to start a podcast. But what's funny is, what people don't necessarily know is, like, I started my professional career full stop in film. I was a sound designer. I know you did. I was working in Brooklyn as a Foley editor. And I'm just now remembering too that one of the times you and I DM'd was actually talking about film. Yeah. Because I saw you and your ex were working on something. It was like, well, if you ever need a sound designer, let me know. Yep. But a good chunk of my friends out here are in film. And when the pandemic hit and we had some time to ourselves, I finished a horror feature that I was writing. Killer. And I wrote a pilot too and stuff. Like, I love that world. Yeah. And I think that what I would love more than anything, and similar to you, is like, okay, yeah, accolades are very, very cool, but I would love if everything kind of worked through itself, as you know. Like, if you're scoring something, actually one of the first films I worked on was Robert Schwartzman's first feature. Oh, cool. And I was the background sound editor on that. But all the score was Rooney, which is his band. Yeah, so that's like, so it's like the whole one. I love this idea of one hand feeding the other. Yeah, but first you have to figure out where the food's coming from. Yeah,
yep, totally.
That's awesome, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I remember that conversation. Yeah, it wasn't lost on me for sure. Because I also, like, I log just that whole network of creatives that are sort of, actively working in multiple fields, because I it's rare that I'll meet anyone else that's sort of riding the fence between two worlds actively. And I think it's great, I think that if anyone wants to do something, they should try it. What I would advise against is, saying, like, walking around and billboarding, like, oh, I do 20 things, like, I do all these things. And it's like, I think that letting the work speak for itself is the most important thing. Like, the only reason that I think I've even had a shot at making a first feature is because of, just sort of like an ethic of discipline. Because, while we were making these short films, we were very quiet about it in our sort of social circles and even in, like, sessions that I would walk into. But we were very active within the genre film, horror film community, the film festival circuit, because you have to do the work. But, there's no making short films to I suppose the degree of quality that I think that we achieved without the 15 years of making shitty movies beforehand, doing a lot of really goofy, silly, funny things that then parlayed into, like 15 or so music videos and then into short docs and so on and so forth. So I think it's, if you're putting in the work, it's great, but, no one should ever just sort of put a creative in a box and say, oh, that's what they do. They just do that.
That's what's so interesting about kind of your mentality around this too. I've been reading a couple, like, books and listening to some lectures on like startups. Mm-hmm. And what I think is so interesting about how everybody talks about startups is that it's just about problem solving. Like, anybody who has is trying to create a product is addressing a problem, which is such an obvious thing for a startup company and so wildly out there for creatives, we don't realize that we're in the same thing. And what I think is really, like, the pipeline that's very interesting is when you start out as an artist, the problem is very, very innate, because an artist solves the problem of people want music, give them music. Right. Like, that's the basic premise. Right. But then when you get into production and songwriting, you become a creative problem solver, because the problem is you have a great artist who their problem is they want to bring music to the people. And they're addressing that problem. So your problem, you're addressing the problem. How do you get them to express themselves? How do you make them sound like themselves?
Yeah.
How do you facilitate that interaction? But I think if you take that one step further, the idea of creative problem solving can exist all over the place.
Yeah.
So filmmaking, I've often said, I don't listen to music podcasts despite having a music podcast.
Yeah, right.
Because I don't learn as much hearing about individual songs as I do from like Mike Birbiglia's podcast about.
I love listening to comedians talk about comedy process. It's so fascinating.
Comedians always approach things as problem solution.
Yeah.
Punchline, setup punchline.
Setup punchline.
And that's, I think, how songwriters do, because basically all creative problem solving is the same problem solving. The same muscle of problem solving.
Yeah, just different mediums.
So I feel like whenever you try to put a creative into a box, like, you know, I've been worried about the dash of like sound designer, songwriter, screenwriter, podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just like, fuck it. No, I'm a spaceship captain. You know, all these other fucking planets are wherever we're venturing to on that day. But my job is to just make sure that we're in the air, you know?
That's enough for nothing. That's why I've taken Renaissance Boy as my artist name, because like that's also in theory the ethos of the Renaissance man, is that there's no boundaries between you and the things you choose to do. That you can be an actual scientist and a draftsman, and those two skills are interrelated. If you're Leonardo da Vinci, you can be inventing new technologies and also making iconic art. And there's no question as to like the label that you're putting on yourself. You're not splitting yourself and splintering yourself off into these various segmented parts of creativity. You simply are a human being interacting with the world in a because I also maintain that the scientific muscle and the creative muscle are also much more similar than we give them credit for. And the people who do like stuff at the intersection of art and science in the modern world, I think also embody that spirit a lot.
But yeah, anyway, all this long rant to say is that we are very much on that same page of let's not put creatives in a box, because creativity isn't making stuff, even though that is the word.
It's problem solving.
Creativity is problem solving.
Yeah.
It's filling a need, you know?
Yeah, totally. No, I definitely agree with that.
I appreciate that a whole lot.
Pausing the podcast to shout out our sponsor, New Wave.
No, I've been drinking coffee my entire life.
You know, as a Roman, same.
As a New Yorker, absolutely.
It's our birthright.
It's our birthright. We came out of the womb drinking coffee.
Fully caffeinated.
And the thing is that we're not getting any younger.
That's true.
And we're not getting any less anxious.
Oh, man, that's true too.
I'll say I have loved coffee my whole life, but lately it hasn't really been agreeing with me.
How so?
Unfortunately, when I drink coffee now, I just start feeling very agitated, very anxious. I've been looking around for alternatives that don't make my heart just beat out of my chest while I'm in the middle of working. And that's how we stumbled upon New Wave. New Wave's Flow State Coffee is an organic ground coffee meant to lower anxiety, improve brain function, and support creativity. With L-theanine and raw cacao, Flow State Coffee is meant to feel like a cup of hot chocolate or tea while giving the energy of coffee.
And now, through Talking Lion, you can try a couple cups of your own.
If you go to their website, newwave.co, that's N-O-O wave.co, you can use the code BrewingLion for 10% off your first order. We hope you get a creative boost and find your flow state.
Now, back to the show.
How did you start the Bad Dreamers? And is the Bad Dreamers just one of you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it is my solo project, but I have my old drummer from the Sunstreak, Gary Foster, who also played drums. He plays drums in Mest. I mean, he's just a monster on the drums. He's incredible. So Gary plays drums. He plays drums on the new record. And my bass player, Ronnie Ficcaro, I Am Ghost, Falling Reverse, also a very Warped Tour circuit background. Now, he also plays bass for Eddie Van Halen's kid, Wolfgang Van Halen.
Right.
He plays bass on the new record, and hopefully, I mean, I'm sure that we're going to lose him to some Wolfgang touring. So, we'll see. Like once we can start playing shows again, I would love for Ronnie to be there. But I think Wolfgang stuff is really breaking out in a very exciting way, and I want Ronnie to have the best gig possible, and that's a better gig than the Bad Dreamers is for sure. But yeah, so it's really like, it is my solo project, but it's been incredible. I mean, the first record I did entirely on my own, but with this new full length, They were very much a part of the process, as well as a few other people as well, which was really cool to sort of branch out and collaborate a bit more.
We have opposite issues, which is we are one sleeping lion, but there are two of us, and you're one person, but bad dreamers. Yeah,
that's been an ongoing like sort of head scratcher. Like, so we're saying David is the bad dreamers, and it's like I know I really shot myself in the foot.
That's really funny.
Well, our manager has had to put in emails. Two people, one lion.
Right. But no, ironically, the Bad Dreamers was born out of. This is really funny. So the first short film that I made here in LA, there's a sequence where I wanted an original song, but I didn't want to just write a song myself and, sing it and have it be in this thing. Cause, like as a sort of upcoming independent filmmaker, you have to wear a lot of hats if you don't have enough money to hire out properly. So I wanted an original song in this sort of opening sequence to be playing in this one scene. So I was going around and asking friends, and I was like, friends that weren't signed, had no, sort of legal loopholes to go through. And I was like, hey, could I use one of your songs for this scene? I'm making a short film. And everybody was just kind of looking at me like, you're doing what? Like, I'm not going to, no, you can't use my music in your short film. Why are you making a short film? Again, it goes back to what I was speaking to before. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I do have to make this music on my own. So I wrote a song called Who You Run To.
I don't know who you run to, but I won't get in your way. Somehow I guess I loved you too much too soon, too little too late.
It's the first song I wrote for the project. And a friend of mine had been throwing around the idea of starting a band in 2015, and we called it the Bad Dreamers at the time, but then we really never did anything with it. So when I was making the short, it's called The Offer. It's kind of like a tribute to Wes Craven's Scream, sort of 5-minute little slasher.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So when I was finishing The Offer, I was like, well, okay, I have this original song now. Maybe I'll just create accounts for the Bad Dreamers, and I'll upload the song to the internet, and I won't associate myself with it directly immediately, but I'll make it look like this is a band that exists, so that if anybody watches The Offer, then they can go and find this band. And then fast forward, like we got like over 100,000 views in YouTube. That's a very small number, relatively speaking, but for us being our first short, we started getting, thousands of views a day. And I was like, wait a minute, like there's a lot of comments about the song, and there's a lot of people playing the song on SoundCloud and sharing it and whatnot. So I was like, I really do enjoy the music that I made for that short. I'm just going to keep making more songs and posting them. And it kind of just snowballed into, oh, maybe I should tour it. Maybe I should make another record. Maybe, so that's kind of, that was sort of the genesis of the ideas that I needed music for the first short that I made out here. And so the Bad Dreamers.
Well, and it's what we were saying about
cool.
one hand sort of inspiring the other and whatnot too. I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Our name actually comes from a short film I made in high school.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So the first film I ever made for like a film class, my best friend, whose last name was Leone, was asleep on a desk. So when our film class asked us to come up with a production company name, I called it Sleeping Lion Productions because he was asleep on a desk. And my friend, by the way, loves that we named the band after him.
That's so cool.
But yeah, when we first started, we were sort of seeing our project more as a sync project.
Yeah.
And then got really into the hype machine world of actual song. Like we were very excited about that space. But because we started as a sync project, we were just calling ourselves Sleeping Lion Productions, just because I had already sort of made that, entity, whatever, exist in a semi-tangible form.
Right.
And then he just liked the name, and I liked the name, so we kept it. But yeah,
that's super cool.
Film inspiring music, which inspires film, which inspires music. You know,
art begets art. It really does, because
art begets art.
It just sort of continuously inspires new things.
That's all you get. That's all you can ask for, Like I don't get jealous of friends who get like playlists. I get jealous of friends who get like animated fan videos.
Right. Honestly, yeah.
Right.
You know?
That, yeah,
and I'll
that's
tell you,
true
we had an
dedication.
acapella group cover one of our songs, and I felt so good. Like there's not been like of anything
I mean,
that we've ever done.
the
that
pieces
is the
of fan
thing.
art that exist of us are really cool, for what it's worth.
Okay, but like Charlie, like our friend CCB had like
Yeah,
somebody
I mean-
made a full animated, like
No, I
just
mean,
for
yeah.
fun, and I'm like, that's amazing.
That's really cool. That's so cool. Yeah, because
Art inspires art, man.
yeah, it shows, like the loyalty of the listener when they go that extra mile to to record a cover of the song or to make a video for the song or whatever it might be. Yeah, the playlist thing is it's an interesting topic. I mean, it's become the beachfront property of the music industry, and
Right.
I think
In the sense that it's very loud and very sandy,
yeah, right, yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions as to like the diplomacy of that process still, because I don't know. I mean, Spotify does claim that their pitch portal for songs to get playlisted is what everyone has to use, and that all the songs get listened to, and they make their decisions based on that. But I mean, all you have to do is go to New Music Friday every week and look at how many of those songs are coming from major labels to know that that is not the case at all. And they're not
Yeah.
playing the game that
Yeah.
they're saying that they're playing. So, I'm certainly not trying to shade Spotify because I don't know.
Yeah, it's just
No,
a
but
saturated market
it's very
responding to its saturation with certain filtration processes. We're always going to have filtration processes and gatekeepers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think speaking to what you're saying, I think a lot of problems we've talked about. We've had this conversation many a time.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is the lie. Like,
It's the transparency,
if
yeah.
Spotify came out and said, okay, yeah, we are holding labels, we'd be like, sick, we knew that, awesome, I love it. I think it's the lie that like everybody has this sort of equal opportunity
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
where the disappointment comes from.
Yeah,
like, I'd rather be
definitely.
told the truth and have to like stomach it. Like there are plenty, like it's like when we hear that like, multi-billion-dollar corporations pay $0 in taxes, we're like, okay, at least that we know. I'm not
Yeah.
happy about it, but at least we're not being told that it's something else,
Right.
Like at least we're not
Sure.
being lied to, whatever.
Pausing the podcast to remind you that we have a Patreon that you can subscribe to if you want to support the show.
If you're enjoying this episode, but you're thinking that you've got a burning question for an artist, or you just want to talk with us, or maybe you just want to mug with our faces, our Patreon's the way to go.
So go to patreon.com/talkinglion to subscribe.
Now back to the show. So you just released a record called Space and Time. I was curious, like, what's the process for making that? And is there a song that's a favorite of yours? Is there a song that you feel is like an entry point for the record? Just tell us about what that was like.
Sure. So I started writing for this album in 2019, just kind of in my free time. I was actually working on something else that was very time consuming. So I didn't have a lot of time to sort of jump right into the second full length. So I wrote New York Minute and Georgetown in 2019. We also released them as singles. And then in January of 2020, I was really sort of mentally preparing for the rest of that record. And then my dad died very suddenly and very unexpectedly. And then,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. It's okay. And then 2 weeks after that, the dog that my ex and I moved out here with died in a freak accident, like 2 weeks to the day after that.
Fuck.
And that was, it was hardcore, man. And then 2 weeks after that, the lockdown started. So I suppose,
Oh, jeez.
yeah, I suppose what began as one thing sort of turned into something entirely differently, because those experiences, obviously, I don't know. I mean, I've dealt with grief before and loss and those things. I think that we all do at different points. But I don't know that I've ever felt the way that I felt back in March of 2020 last year. It was dark, and I've been sober for 5 years. I had a pretty serious problem with alcohol and addiction, and I had a near miss that I thought would never happen. I didn't think that. I didn't think that I was I've been to AA and I've heard the stories, and in the back of my mind, as objective and open-minded as I was through going to the program, I was always just kind of like, I'm here to do the work, but like I'm never going to fall off. And then when those things happened, I sort of woke up to that reality that, once you're addicted to something, you're an addict for the rest of your life, and you have to do the work to. I feel like I would be dishonest if I didn't, share exactly what it took for me to get sober, especially just as a musician, because I feel like it's weird. Alcohol and substance abuse it's not necessarily mutually exclusive with the music community, but it comes so hand in hand because, especially on tour, like the venues are typically bars, or they have bars. And a lot of the business that takes place in the industry happens over drinks, or, in a very relaxed, casual way, unlike a lot of other industries. So alcoholism goes back many generations on my dad's side. My dad was an alcoholic. His mom, I believe her dad. And so, typically when you have a generational sort of alcoholic gene, it gets passed down to, at least one child. And I think, the sort of impetus for my drinking beyond that genetically was sort of rooted in social anxiety. I was sexually abused as a child by a relative that, I won't necessarily name, but I was really young. And when I found music, much like with anyone who discovers a love for making music, you sort of wrap your identity up in that. And, so I, as a teenager, just starting to play gigs in the local scene, we're always at bars and everything, and you're around older people, and, like you don't necessarily have to be of age to be offered alcohol. And I found that, a lot of my anxiety was alleviated through drinking. And over time, it's funny. It's like, drugs and alcohol can offer a really fun ride, but, the destination is essentially the middle of nowhere, ultimately, when you become an adult, if you keep up with it. And while it is really fun, truly all it does is reveal our worst qualities and perpetuate our deepest insecurities.
Was there a moment that you were led to? Was there a kind of bottom?
Oh yeah, for sure. So touring, I was in a band throughout most of my 20s that, we toured really hard, and, all we did was drink. And then when I sort of set out to have a career as a writer and producer, I was living outside of Manhattan. I was alone, doing a session a day, multiple sessions a day. And at that point, after having come off of just years and years of playing gigs, the drinking is it just really started to spiral. And even throughout my 20s, I can't tell you how many times I was arrested for fighting, or for drunk driving, or public intoxication, or literally dozens of times. I lost count. And right when things began to pick up for me as a writer, and I got a third DUI, and that situation very quickly, just because of the record that I had and the circumstances that sort of led to it, that became very quickly, looking at real time in prison. I was ready to accept 6 months in Westchester County Jail, because the thing is, when you're looking at an alcohol and vehicular related charge, typically you've got one of two options. They're either going to give you probation, or they're going to put you in jail. And the way that my situation was at the time, I was living in Westchester County, and every day I was either going to my mentor's place in Connecticut to do a session, or I was going to Manhattan to do a session. So when you have probation, you're not allowed to leave the county that you reside in without a letter signed by the judge. So that would have meant that every single day of my life that I wanted to go and do a session, because, I wasn't writing in Westchester, I would have had to have a letter signed by a judge daily, 5 or 6 days a week, just to leave the county and do what I was doing to make a living. So the lawyer that I had at the time was like, look, this isn't even an option for you. You can't go through those hoops every day. And further, they just won't, they won't facilitate it. And it would cost me so much money in legal fees and everything. So we opted in for a light sentence. And I remember the day that we sort of came to the table and we were like, yeah, you're going to go away. And then after you're out, you'll have a light probation that will give you the flexibility to leave the county for work, but only for work.
Part of the agreement, the settlement was that you would spend jail time?
Yeah. We were going to opt for 6 to 9 months in Westchester County Jail. And hopefully, hopefully maybe released in 4 to 5. But county jail is weird, man. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but it could have gone for much longer just based on the sort of infrastructure of how county jails work and the dangers of, everyone being intermixed and the populations being shared. And, offenders aren't necessarily separated in county jail. It's a place where serious criminals, violent criminals, federal offenses, they're all mixed in together and things can go wrong very quickly in county jail, unlike even in some federal penitentiaries or state prisons. So, I mean, who's to say what would have happened? But ultimately, my lawyer found a loophole that got me out altogether. The charge, the DUI was still a misdemeanor. It's a serious misdemeanor, but I had been talking about moving to Los Angeles for some time. And my lawyer was like, look, if you want to move to Los Angeles for business, the state of New York can't necessarily stop you from doing that because your charge isn't a felony, but the county of Los Angeles also won't take a transfer because the charge isn't a felony. So if I were to come to LA and I had a felony, then probation would transfer over to here, and then I would just carry on probation here. But because it was a misdemeanor, they couldn't necessarily get in the way of my moving. So he was like, I need you to find a place, sign a lease, put a deposit down, make it official, get a letter from your publisher, do all these things to put it in place.
Wow.
And he found this back door out of that situation. And I remember my ex-girlfriend, who's also my best friend, Julie, she was there for this whole thing. And, we started dating right after I got that third DUI. And she was there for all the court and everything. She watched it happen. And I remember like coming home and there was this moment where I was like, I have to like read these documents and these books on like how to prepare for incarceration and how to make it was truly surreal. And it literally took that situation to shake me out of the drinking. And it wasn't, at the time it felt so strange and coincidental that all these things were happening at a point in my career where it was just starting to bubble up and things were really starting to happen. And it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand the concept of, balance in life at the time. But looking back on it now, by no means is it a coincidence, because that was like a third strike for me.
What was your road to recovery like? Like, did you go to any programs or?
Yeah. So part of getting my license in California, because I did still have, I had a DUI in LA from before, from a writing trip that I was here on. And then I had 2 DUIs in the state of New York. So part of the requirements for getting my driver's license in California were that I had to spend a mandatory amount of hours in Alcoholics Anonymous, go through the 12-step program, as well as drunk driving education courses and all sorts of other sort of things that the DMV of California requires if you have an alcohol-related charge. So when I started the program, I quickly realized, I was like, when you have an addiction, and I didn't even necessarily recognize it as an addiction at first, because it was always rooted in some sort of social aspect. I wasn't waking up and drinking to get through a day. It wasn't like that, which is also kind of the sleight of hand of addiction, because, when your partying is rooted in a social aspect, and, you're only behaving and consuming in certain environments, it's really easy to trick yourself into thinking that you don't have a problem, when that in itself is the problem. So when I got into AA, my sponsor, I mean, this is someone that while he was cooking dinner, he would crack 6 beers over the stove because his family couldn't hear them, and he would put them above the fridge for the next morning so that he could come down, drink them before he got in the shower. After you use mouthwash, which is alcohol based, nobody would know that he had already started drinking at 7 a.m. So I quickly realized that there are different severities to alcoholism and addiction and whatnot. And I'm fortunate that I wasn't physically dependent on it, but just being around other people that had their own struggles with it and their own stories that sort of led them to the program was without a doubt the most eye-opening and enlightening experience that I've had, just sort of in hindsight of all that time that I spent drinking. And honestly, I would recommend AA to anybody. Like I think they should teach it in school. There's just there are principles with forgiveness and humility and acceptance and just so many other sort of fundamental things that we as human beings tend to overlook sometimes, and we don't always check in with, that the program is rooted in. So yeah, I would definitely attribute a lot of the long-term recovery to just the upkeep of going to the program and sticking with it and sort of living by the book. And it's very hard to recognize when things are spinning out of control. If it's yourself that you find yourself in this pattern of constant consumption. But it's also just as difficult to watch from the sidelines and to be the friend or the relative or the partner that has the courage to step up and say, like, hey, this is just going too far. Like it's a fine line between getting involved and minding our own business. And it's, it's a bit of a dance, but I feel like, listening to your intuition and really sort of trusting, there's a sensation that you get when you're around an addict. It's this kind of like third eye sort of lens on a person. If you don't share that addiction with them, that, it's kind of hard to ignore when you're watching it happen in real time. But it's tough. It's tough to address because you want to be there for the people that you care about, but you don't want to make them feel attacked and you don't want to make them feel lesser than or weaker or, I don't know. So, I mean, I would just simply say to anyone listening that if you have that voice in your head that's maybe sort of asking those extra questions about the night before, and you're waking up and, you don't recall things or I don't know, whatever the case may be, it's important to listen to that and to not succumb to, just the sort of ride of the social aspect of it, because it really does lead to nowhere ultimately, I think.
I appreciate you sharing that, man. I really, really do. Pausing the podcast to remind you that voting is now open for the People's Choice Podcast Awards nominations. You can help us get nominated for an award.
Nomination voting is open until July 31st, so go to podcastawards.com to vote for Talking Lion in the music category.
We appreciate your support and we look forward to growing this podcast together. Now back to the show.
So I would say that, space and time as a whole is sort of the result of kind of coming to terms with a lot of things that I don't know that I was really ready to come to terms with yet. So even, so there's sort of an introduction piece to the album. And then the second song is called One Way Ticket.
'Cause I can't go where you're going. So just promise you'll come and visit. It's not fair never knowing where you went on that one-way ticket.
I wrote it for my dad. And when I wrote it, I want to say it was maybe like a month and a half after he had passed away. And I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to finish this. Like I can't, like I could barely get through, because I sort of just opened my notepad. My writing process is different. I write lyrics without music or anything. I think of, whatever it is that I want to say, and I just write the song on the notepad before I touch an instrument. So I wrote the lyrics out, and I didn't even look at them until probably June, because it was at a point for me, and I think this is touching on more of like a mental health note, but I'm actually happy to elaborate because I think it's important. I got to a point where I was crying so much from February to March to April to May that by the time, well, I should actually back up a little bit. I think that when you go through something traumatic, like losing someone that you love or losing a pet or, whatever it might be, it's really important to let all of those emotions move through you on their terms. Because if you try to suppress them and if you try to ignore them And if you try to, even worse, maybe control them, it never really ends well, because, that's not something that we have control of. Like, we experience things in life that are out of our sort of realm of control, and we have to adjust and cope with them the best we can. So I think that when something like that happens for anyone, there's two sides to that coin. You have to let those emotions move through you. But I think it's also healthy to, get out and be social to a degree and be around people that you love and not dwell day in and day out closed up in your home. So I think ironically, when the lockdown started in March, it really forced me to look all of it in the eye and be like, well, I guess this is how we're doing this. So, I mean, I remember like come like May or so, maybe April, late April, May, I was scheduling times to cry. Like I would wake up in the morning, and know that I could just explode right then and there. But I was like, if I do that, I'm going to be physically exhausted for the rest of the day. But I had at least a little bit of control back in my everyday life where I could say, okay, if I can jump in the shower, get out, get the work done that I need to do for the day, then around 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, then I can really let it out and I can go to bed. And that started to become almost like a daily routine. And throughout that period of time is sort of when I kind of built up the guts to sit down with instruments and really push through the rest of the album. So I think that by and large, it's probably just an exploration of like why we're here, what the fuck we're doing, what happens next. Does anything happen next? I don't know. But I think that that's sort of like the core of like most of the material, I think.
I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And also just like, I feel that. And I feel like it comes out in the music, but also comes out in how you talk about it and how hard learned those lessons are. I think it's interesting what you say. In 2015, I lost some cousins pretty tragically, and I was like, oh, I'm fine about this. Like, don't worry about it. I'm fine about this. And I didn't wind up like talking to like a therapist about it, and actually doing like trauma, counseling and stuff until 2 years later, because I was like, oh, I'm fine. I was making jokes about it. I was like, I would tell anybody who, whatever. I was like, I was completely fine as far as I knew. And then I had the most fucked up dreams like anybody could really have, about it. And like, that was when I knew that I wasn't as like good as I thought. Because for a while, I just thought that like I was just gonna feel terrible all the time, and that was just how it is. And then now you have a cry, and it feels like somebody kneading their thumb into your shoulder, and it's like, oh wait, fuck, yeah, I guess I haven't.
Yeah, it's
hadn't addressed that knot. Yeah,
it's a very cathartic, and it's not that I was afraid to cry before that. I would cry when I go to the movies all the time, or if I feel very empathetic to other people's situations, and I've had perspective now through some of the other things that I've struggled with, and especially learning through AA, through the program, just really just becoming appreciative of the similarities and also crazy differences that we all share in our own ways. It's a really humbling thing to accept. And so I was no stranger to crying before, but I hadn't like violently cried. I don't know if ever. I still have my moments, and it's not to that degree, but there is a very cathartic quality once you let it out. And it was something that I really wasn't aware of. Like, it is a very therapeutic thing. And I think, it's good because I do hear a lot more now that, I think like the idea or the identity rather of the male is, or was associated with, be tough and, swallow your pride and, stand your ground and all these things. And it's like, I don't know, even with my dad, I think I saw him cry twice in the entire time that I knew him. And that's, I'm 38 now. So, it was stigmatized to be vulnerable as a male for decades in this country. Mm-hmm. And, that's not healthy. Like, that's just not healthy. And you'll actually find if strength is important to you, you'll become even stronger if you're willing to be vulnerable and let those things out.
That's like the most brave thing a human can do is be vulnerable.
I agree. Yeah.
I always felt like because I was never the most fucked up person in the room that I wasn't allowed to feel what I was feeling. I would always sort of compare how I was feeling to who I was around. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. That, or we're storytellers. Naturally, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was fine about stuff and being vulnerable because I was telling everybody these stories about my life and telling stories about how I felt and telling all these whatever. And then my first therapy session, I'm telling her everything. And she's like, crafting a narrative is not the same as being vulnerable. And I was realizing I was even like putting space between vulnerability by telling people,
that's big.
What was happening. And so, that's the big thing too, is like, sometimes you can't even say how, like what's happening or why you're feeling what you're feeling. Sometimes you just got to be like, I'm out of fucking spoons, and then just sob. And that's wonderful.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Stopping the podcast to shout out one of our sponsors, The Truffleist. Noah, you like to cook.
I do like to cook.
You're actually very good at cooking.
I'd say I'm decent.
But I think that the thing about cooking that you have taught me is that flavor is everything.
Truly.
You got to bring in little flavors that you wouldn't expect. And one of my favorite flavors is the taste of truffles.
A great flavor.
But we are so lucky to have the Truffleist as a sponsor for Talking Lion. Founded by Jimmy Coons and based in Long Island City, Queens, the Truffleist creates artfully handcrafted truffle products of the highest quality and flavor.
While their truffles are imported from the countrysides of Italy, France, and Spain, they proudly source many of their base ingredients locally from small farms and artisanal producers.
They offer a variety of truffle products, from truffle oil and truffle butter to truffle salami and honey to even truffle hot sauce.
I love truffle hot sauce.
They've also recently launched cheesesteaks by the Truffleist, so keep an eye out for pop-ups in your area. So bring the taste of truffle into your life. Go to truffleist.com, that's TRUFFLEIST.com to place your first order.
Now back to the show.
You recently worked on a TV show that has a lot of music in it from what I've read, called Do Re Mi.
Yeah.
And it's got Kristen Bell and Fred Armisen. Like, that's incredible. Tell me about how that project came to be.
Yeah.
And what it's been like working on that.
Yeah. So one of the best friends that I've made since starting this journey as a songwriter is a girl named Jackie Tone. She's been an actor her whole life. She was on The Nanny. She was on The Sopranos. She was on a season of American Idol. And she and she ultimately signed to the same publishing company that I was with back in the day with Green and Bloom. So she and I really hit it off early on, writing together and just chopping it up and cracking jokes. Like, we just have a very great sort of chemistry as friends. And she was also on Glow. She played Melrose on Glow.
Nice.
Cool.
And so Jackie is also an incredible. She's an incredible comedian, an incredible actress, an incredible songwriter, an incredible singer, an incredible writer. I mean, I'm proud of what I've been able to sort of discipline and manifest into my life. But I look at someone like her and I'm like, it's truly incredible. Like, what she is great at, it's almost like there's no limit. And also just as a human being, I don't know. I love her so much. She's one of my best friends. So she created this show called Do Re and Me with her friend Michael Scharf, who is now a great friend of mine. And Mike is animator, illustrator, screenwriter. Again, just an insanely talented guy. So Jackie and Mike created this show back in 2014. And the sort of the idea for the show is that it was intended to be an animated series that introduced music education to kids in a fun way. So when they were putting the pitch together to bring it around town, Jackie came to me and she was like, we need some music to help with this pitch. So let's write a song that we can, make part of our presentation. And then, so we wrote one song, and her best friend is Kristen Bell. She and Kristen have been friends since way before either of them could get hit by a bus out here, like a long time.
Oh, wow.
And so, so she showed it to Kristen, and Kristen fell in love with it because, you know, she has kids. She's an incredible musician herself, a legit musician now. I can say that after having worked with her for 4 years. And she was like, I want to be a part of this. I want to be involved, and I think I can help. So once Kristen came on board as an executive producer, the three of them really sort of marched it around and found a home with Gaumont, who produces the show, and Amazon is releasing it this fall. And basically, it's Do, Re, and Me is about three little birds that live in this world called Bebopsburg. The first season is 52 episodes. Every episode focuses on different music curriculum and different learning. And each episode ends with an original song. And Jackie and I wrote every original song. We wrote the theme song. I served as music supervisor on the show. I voice directed half of the show with Meredith Lane, the casting director, who is incredible. And Jackie plays Ray. Kristen plays me. Luke Youngblood from like Harry Potter and The Lion King, he plays Do. And Fred Armisen plays a character named Juan Peacock. It's such an awesome show. And it's like for animated shows for preschool, it blows everything else out of the water because it's Pixar quality 3D animation. It's stunning.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it was greenlit, I think, mid 2018, and we're still not done. Like, we're still working on this first season.
That's wild.
That's so awesome.
Those kinds of shows take so long to make, which is both like so exciting and also so, it's not disheartening, it's not the right word, but it's like, it's humbling, like the level to which like the magic of 3D and even 2D animation like is such a feat of like line production and just human work power.
But I was also going to say too is like, I think working on something like that is such a noble thing too, because you're gonna be like part of somebody's childhood.
Yeah, that's
like
crazy.
You're like that's like Steve from like, oh man, one of my favorite videos on YouTube is Steve from Blue's Clues.
His moth.
It's
such a great story.
He like the Moth Storytellers seminar. He talks about what it was like being Steve, you know, and being this person for kids. And it's like, you know, those early songs. I remember every song Mr. Sweetlicky showed us in elementary school.
What's so cool about Do, Re, and Me is that, you know, although it is catered towards preschool, the whole idea from the ground floor was we don't want this to sound like kids' music. We want legitimate jazz, legitimate pop, legitimate world music, legitimate rock, legitimate metal. And when you can do those things, because if you look at kids, when they listen to like, I mean, one of my favorite classic YouTube videos ever is Dubstep Baby. And it's this little girl, little baby,
Right.
She's eating spaghetti and she's in her high chair with like the little table and her bib on. And her parents are playing her dubstep and she's got this gnarly face on and she's like rocking to the music. And it's like kids react to adult music, but you can't really play them adult music if the lyrics are sort of inappropriate. So the idea was to create adult sounding music with lyrics that catered to that demographic.
That's really cool.
And my parents were very much about that. Like my dad considered it education for me to like hear Yes because of all the things that were going on. Like I got into playing piano not because like I heard something on the radio or like, you know, Mozart, but because I heard the piano solo from Siberian Khatru by Yes, and I'm like, there we go.
Wow.
You know, and my mom showed like Broadway show tunes, and you know, like even something like The Lion King, or like, I mean, our generation was so lucky to grow up on like that golden age of Disney music that like, incredible. Oh man, like all those songs, like that is an education unto itself. But I think that I'm not a parent, but my aunt is a newly a parent. Who actually my aunt has seen you live because it was the aunt that came to the Chance Violet show. But cool. I can tell you, speaking for what I know of parents, that anything that could replace Baby Shark will be treated with
be welcomed with open
with a party.
arms. Yeah,
you'll have a parade and a day named after you.
Yeah, totally.
You know, because I was walking around IKEA and I heard like 3 kids singing Baby Shark, and I was like, I'm already sick of this song.
Right.
Yeah. Good for whoever wrote that thing. I mean, like, God bless them, but also fuck them.
I mean, yeah.
Like, it's like,
yeah.
It was actually an 8-year-old, and they've already retired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Totally. That's so funny.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we're gonna keep an eye out for all of it. You know, because it's you embody something that we really respect and something that we really are striving for, which is this creative problem solving ethos of
Yeah.
just be involved with cool projects and with cool people, you know, and
Yep.
and it's actually really inspiring too. Like I just turned 25 and it is a bit daunting and a bit scary to think, okay, are there limits to my career? Will there be things that, you know, or will what I'm trying to do be harder or whatever the older I get and whatever? And I think that every time I get worried, I look up to some of my older creative friends who are just like, no, you're just getting better.
Oh,
like
yeah,
you're just
100%.
and your friends are leveling up with you, you know?
Yeah, straight up. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. You can't use the ticking time clock of age to measure your career trajectory is moving along with it. You know, it's like everyone has a different journey and it's relative to them. And, you know, I understand how it is to, you know, sometimes to see like someone at a very young age have incredible success. It's like, you know, you think like, shit, well, like, why didn't I have that when I was 20? Or like, what did I do wrong? And it's like, it's not necessarily that any of us did anything wrong. It's just, that's just not our path. You know what I mean? And, you know, you can manifest to a degree and everything, but, you know, I think there's a bit of luck involved always. It's discipline and it's a wild ride, but I totally
Well, I think
relate
there's
to
something
that.
freeing about turning 25 and like just killing the idea of that, oh, I hope I could be a young artist thing. Because then I'm going to be like, oh, okay, you know what, fine. I'm not going to, you know, be a Billie Eilish or whatever. I'm okay with that. I can let that go.
Yeah.
Now I have all this time to plant seeds and not have to worry about how long those seeds take to grow.
Yeah.
Because before I always, you know, I think that so much of our early, because we started Sleeping Lion when we were, you know, 19 or 19 or 20. And so I think that like so much of that early time I remember was just dedicated to panic, just dedicated to like feeling the clock of we only have 3 years to do this or 4 years to do this or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And now I feel like that clock has gotten quiet, which is good on the one hand and bad on the other hand. Good because I can plant seeds, bad because I feel like I always just need a clock to get anything done.
Right.
But yeah, it has been really, really just cool to see how our friends have just like continued to level up. Like, you know, even 10 years older than us or 20 years older than us. And I think what's interesting is like film, obviously actors have to deal with it because of how like of looks or whatever. But like, I feel like film people don't think about age the same way music people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There is like, you know, I mean, there are of course castings for actors, which, you know, but
of course
the beautiful thing about acting though is that, you know, there's a job for everybody at the end of the day.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
like, you know, because we need people in our.
I mean,
films.
so many iconic actors didn't start their career until their 30s or their 40s, even their 50s, and like that was just their time. Like that was the time and the age that they were able to embody the roles that made them iconic in our pop culture, and like that's very cool to me.
Totally.
I want to be a great like old Michael Sheen actor.
Yeah,
That's,
I could see
I want to
that.
be like a Michael Sheen.
Yeah, right. Just start crushing as soon as you turn 60.
Yeah.
Just start booking
Could
so
be.
many great roles.
Oh man. Or yeah, you know, just
Even Billy Bob Thornton didn't start his career till his 30s,
Billy Bob's a gem.
and he's
what a treasure.
It's truly a national treasure.
David, are you ready for the question round?
The question round.
Let's do it.
First question is, what is your phone background?
It's a picture of our dog that passed in, as well as the dog that I still have.
That's sweet. I guess we've talked about this at length. Do you have a non-musical hobby, I guess, other than making films? Is there something else?
Maybe even non-creative,
maybe non-creative
hobby.
something.
I have no hobbies. I think I just, I mean, I'm just so all consumed by the creative process, I guess. I should
think
have
that's
hobbies.
valid.
I mean, you know, I think getting out and being active and, you know, getting sunlight, and especially right now with this lockdown, I think that not enough people are talking about the importance of, you know, being healthy, you know, take vitamins, get sunlight, you know, get out of your house.
I think biking saved my mental in the lockdown.
Yeah. It's
very
directly
much
correlated to your ability to, you know, be able to think clearly, you know, just a very basic level, like get out there and get your blood flowing.
Definitely. All right, the most important question.
The
of our
most
podcast.
important question. On our
Maybe the most
podcast.
important question you'll ever be asked in your life,
ever.
ever. Would you be a pirate? Arr.
Would I be a pirate?
Yeah.
It's really funny that you asked me this question because anybody that knows me really well knows that if I ever retire, and I mean retire is like, it's a tricky thing when you're a creative, like, you know, it's like you're retiring
Right.
from an office job.
When your IRA kicks in.
Yeah, right. No, a lifelong goal of mine is to treasure hunt actively in the Caribbean.
Whoa.
True story.
That's
He's
very
one
cool.
of us.
True
That's very
story.
cool.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said I haven't started to construct a long-term plan to make that a reality in 30 years.
That's still a thing that you can do, right? In theory, there's still treasure to be found in this great wide world of
There
ours.
is quite a bit of Spanish treasure in particular to be found in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And maritime law does lend itself to the explorers. So, I mean, you know, it can be a dangerous pursuit, but yeah, listen, I've even geocache, like to actually, like, I don't know if have you heard of
Yeah.
geocache? It's like a treasure hunting app. Like, I mean, it takes everything within me not to download that app because I know I will start going after all those geocaches, like all those caches, because I'm telling
That's
you,
so funny.
I'm telling you, I am so fired up about the idea of treasure hunting. There's just something magical about it. And again, it's not about, I don't want, like, if I find treasure, like, cool, but it's about the search. It's about the exploration.
Yeah.
Like, that is just, it's something
about
that
the friends
I've
you make along
always
the
wanted
way.
to do.
Yes to all of that.
We'll be right there with you, honestly. We'll be part of your crew.
I'm so down.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't realize you were like a pirate person. Like
I don't know that. I mean, pirating, I'm not trying to steal anything from anybody, but I think, you know, just
No, of course.
Yeah, I was about to say that I think there's a key distinction between hunting for already pilfered treasure and pilfering treasure from a Spanish galleon.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction to draw.
Yeah.
You're more of a scavenger than a pirate, but there's a pirate ethos to it. There's
Of
a pirate
course.
soul
Oh, yeah.
there.
No.
In a sense, you're still stealing from Spain. It's
Right.
just Spain has no longer
Yeah,
said it's theirs
Spain-
anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Netflix just
very
released a sort of
Documentary
Oh,
that
yeah.
we watched
Did
the
you watch it?
hell out of.
know.
Okay, good.
we
As soon as I saw
tore
it come
through
up, I was
that.
like, well, I'm not doing anything else tonight.
Yeah, we
okay.
literally tore through it.
I felt like the narrative sort of docu-style, narrative style was like, that got a little confusing. Or maybe not confusing, but I wasn't.
It was a weird.
There was a lot of acting.
It was a lot of acting.
That's what I'm saying,
and,
like
and a lot of
Penis.
penis.
Yeah, a lot of that. The reenactment narrative shots mixed with the docu-style, you know, traditional documentary format was bold. I don't know if it worked that well, but you know, I finished it.
You
so I
got to
guess it
respect
did.
the hustle of it, though.
Also, though, weird that they extolled the virtues of like the feminism presented in pirate culture and then never mentioned Mary.
Yeah. They
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
buried the
Dude.
lead there on that one.
Oh, we have the same brain. That's so funny.
Yeah, I'm like, you can't talk about Anne without talking about
No,
Mary.
you have to
Like,
talk
that's-
about Mary. Like, there's no.
They were. Yeah,
That's like
like
talking
they were
about the Stones and like mentioning like Keith and not like, I don't know. Like, yeah.
Yeah. It was just very weird because it was just like pirates were very feminist and it was very amazing and it was amazing how feminist they were. Okay, then talk about the ship where there were 2 female fucking captains.
Yeah. And they made this whole thing out of Anne Bonny, but they didn't even do that much with the Anne Bonny story. Like, I would have preferred more
Right.
Anne Bonny and less Blackbeard's syphilitic member.
Totally.
Yeah, we saw a lot of Blackbeard syphilitic.
It was in 2 different episodes.
That's so funny. Wow.
Yeah, we are
awesome.
very much of like mind, matey.
Yar.
Somewhat related.
Next question.
Not even related. I'm not even going to try to segue. But do you have any tattoos? If so, what was your first?
Yeah, I have a sleeve here and I have a couple here. My first one was a stone cross. I don't know why it was a stone
Why?
cross. I just wanted a tattoo, so I got a stone cross on my right arm. And
I respect that.
You know, the church loves you.
that's it. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
That's pretty. It's pretty metal.
That's pretty
the stone
metal,
cross is pretty
yeah.
metal.
Well, I was in a metal band, that's why. So Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So good.
Yeah, very much.
It was literally metal. On that note, what was the first concert you ever attended?
Joan Osborne.
Whoa.
Yeah. What if God
very nice.
was one of us?
Right.
Yeah, first concert.
Right. Just as I always thought it was
Just a slob and abacus. That's what I thought.
I thought it was just a sloth, which would have been on brand for it. Like that's not outside the realm of possibility. I just thought that was hilarious because I always thought I thought it was like the animal.
Yeah, right.
And I'm
right.
like, I don't know. It was just a dumb thing that I thought in high school.
Yep.
But wow, that's an interesting concert. It was a good show.
Does she have other songs?
I think so.
Yeah, does
I
she
mean,
have
I
other
only
songs?
knew that song, and the reason I went was because my dad, so he was a property manager, and he went to so the venue she was playing at was the Auditorium Theater or something in Rochester, and one of his tenants worked at the theater. It was like a stagehand or something, or like a union guy or something. So when my dad went to, he like met the guy at the venue to collect the rent that day. The guy was like, "Hey, do you want tickets for the show tonight?" And my dad was like, I don't, but maybe my kid will. And so I went to see Joan Osborne that night, and it was pretty cool. She sounded
That was
great.
pretty cool.
I love that.
Very cool. Can you recommend our beloved listeners a movie, a book, and a TV show?
Well, being that I am so passionate about horror, I would say, God, there's so many movies I want to recommend. I feel like it's a loaded question. Okay, I would say if you're into horror, a more recent horror masterpiece would be Hereditary. A TV show, I would say, I would recommend Ozark.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, huge fan of Ozark. And a book, I would probably have to say, I don't read a lot of books, so I feel like I'm not very qualified to recommend books. I need to read more.
What about a script?
A script. Look up there's a script that's unproduced, which is actually this is a fun sort of treasure hunt for the listeners. There's an unproduced script that's optioned and it's supposed to be made called 1031. Eli Roth's production company picked it up, and it was one of the most buzzed about scripts in the horror community over the last year. I've read it. It is a very good script. It's a very fun read if you're into like teenage, maybe coming of age mystery horror comedy. Definitely check it out.
That sounds very
It's out
cool.
there. It's a PDF.
Were you a Haunting of Hill House fan?
I was. Yeah, I was. I loved it.
I can't stop thinking about it. I think we watched it maybe 4 months ago now, and I still think about it probably every day.
Oh,
it's so good.
Yeah. Did you watch Bly Manor?
I did. I didn't like Bly Manor as much, but
Yep. Much different speed for sure. But
yeah.
Hill
I'll
House
I'll
was-
see Olivia Pedretti in anything. So that's just the long and short of it.
yeah, Haunting of Hill House was incredible.
Hill House was incredible. I mean, Mike Flanagan, like, that's the thing I love about Dr. Sleep was like it's like what happens if you give a horror nerd carte blanche, all of Kubrick's old like research, and also just like Stephen King in your corner, you get Dr. Sleep. Like it's Mike Flanagan having a field day. It's awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I do actually prefer the Mick Garris Shining as to in terms of its loyalty to the original material. The Kubrick Shining, I think, is a better film, but in terms of its loyalty to the book, it is not The Shining. The book, he made an entirely different thing. But
well, and that's why I feel like Dr. Sleep like actually marries the two worlds really, really well.
yeah, it does. Yeah, it totally does.
Like I think because I think that like he was aware that King hated Kubrick's version, but also aware that people loved that iconography. So he did a good job of like blending both, I think.
Yep.
Overall. Here's the thing. I love reading horror Wikipedia pages.
Oh, okay.
My favorite thing is to just go through and read what happens. Because I have a terrible time watching them if they're too scary. Like my favorite thing is when I'm watching something that somebody tells me is a horror film, and I realize that the person who recommended it has like a very low bar for what horror is.
Sure.
But like if somebody who loves horror films recommends a movie, like a good horror film, I can't watch it. I know that I don't have that kind of nerve.
Yeah, it's very
yeah.
It is very rare that I walk into a theater and come out like deeply affected, or like later that night I'm thinking about what I watched. And after I saw Hereditary, I was up that whole night and the next night, and I was like, I need to go see this again with like an objective lens. And yeah, man, that's a masterpiece.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. I could see Us 5 times because I think like it's scary, but it didn't like freak me out
Yeah.
and like give me nightmares.
Totally.
I wasn't able to sleep for a week after the Bent Neck Lady episode.
Interesting.
Like
Yeah.
for some reason, that's where the line is.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think existential horror fucks me up a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
Like, yeah.
That was a very scary episode, no question. And then episode 6 with that like 15-minute oneer, like that was just
Yeah.
oh,
Oh my God.
So
yeah.
good.
Two Storms is one of the most technically insane things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's wild.
Do you have a scar with a story?
Yeah, I went through a glass door when I was like 23. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see it, but the glass went in there and then it came out there.
Oh, geez.
Because when the glass broke, it kind of created like a small hook. So the hook went around the bone. And I remember when I got up, I saw the glass poking out of the inside of my arm. And I was like, oh, and when I went to pull it, I felt it on the other side. I felt it move on the other side. I was like, oh, this is bad. And there was, I don't want to trigger anybody, but it was not pretty. It was not pretty.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your hand doing through a glass?
So I was cleaning. So I was cleaning one of the apartments that my dad was renting, and I was wearing shoes, and I just mopped, and I was like making my way out through this back door, and it was one of those doors where the middle portion was glass, and then the top was like a screen, and the bottom was like metal. And as I was going to reach for the door, my foot slipped because the floor was so slippery. I just used like that oil, and I went right in through the door with my arm first. So not only did I went through it, but I went down into it as well. It was it was pretty gnarly.
Oh, that is very gnarly. That is a gnarly story. All right, next question is, what are 3 thoughts you have at this very moment?
3 thoughts that I have at this very moment. I'm gonna follow up with Nate to get the name of that pirate game. Sea of Thieves, is it?
Sea of Thieves, yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Second thought would be, my neighbor has been doing some sort of power washing since like 6 in the morning. It's been going on this whole time. I don't think it'll pick up in the mic if I put the noise gate on it, but I'm really beginning to wonder when it's going to end, because it's turned into this white noise that's now just sort of in my subconscious. And third thought would be, I'm very proud of my other little dog, Gumby, he's been asleep this whole time. And he usually, when he thinks I'm talking to somebody on the phone or something, he thinks that they're here or they're coming. So he'll get up and hop around and get anxious, but he's been a very good boy. I'm proud of him.
Well, thank you, Gumby, for letting
That's
us
really sweet.
peacefully conduct our chat. You know.
Yeah.
And the final question of the question round is, what are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? A maskless world with movies and concerts and a booming economy, and people getting together again, like we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be together. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, before things are back up and running, let's hop on a pirate ship,
Let's go.
and then when things are up and running, let's see a movie at the Vista Theater,
Yep.
Yes.
and let's search for geocaches.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I'm so down. That's awesome.
Let's rent a galleon.
Yeah. Just a sloop.
Just a sloop.
Oh,
It
man.
could just be a sloop.
You know, I'm a modest guy. I'm okay with a sloop.
Yep. I'd be good with that. Yeah.
No, but David, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so excited about the show you're working on. Congratulations on the release of your record, and we can't wait for everything. All the numerous creative ventures you're up to. We'll be excitedly listening and watching and experiencing as they come. So thank you so much for being here, man.
No, thank you guys for having me. This was really cool. I'm glad we got to chat.
'Cause I can't go where you're going. So just promise you'll come and visit. It's not fair, never knowing. And I keep knowing where you went on that one-way ticket.
for listening to this episode of Talking Lion.
We would like to thank New Wave, The Truffleist, and Isotope for their support of Talking Lion.
If you'd like to show your support, ask our guests your questions, talk to us on Discord, and get a shout out at the end of each episode, subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/talkinglion.
Thank you for listening, and see you next time.